We're repeating an experiment here that was conducted at the turn of the century to try and settle this question. What we have on the blackboard is a rather conventionalized drawing of Mars showing the dark and light areas that everybody agrees exist, but no canals, no linear features. These girls don't know what they're drawing. They haven't seen that in close-up. And we've asked them to draw exactly what it is they see. And we're waiting to see what the result of this experiment is. This experiment, carried out in Trincomalee, Sri Lanka, some 80 years after it was first done in England, shows very clearly that the human eye has a tendency to link up patterns, to create patterns where they don't exist. And some of these drawings are pretty much like levels. One here, thin, very thin lines, which aren't on the original drawing at all. And symmetrical patterns. Again, nothing like the original object. So I'm sure what happened in the case of Lowell was that his eye linked together the various dots and smudges on Mars and saw this gridwork of lines which looked so artificial and which we now know is not there at all.
The canals of Mars aren't the only thing to have gone missing in the history of astronomy. A whole planet has disappeared. It was in central France that in a classic confrontation, the planet Vulcan was born. Now Richard Baum, an English astronomer, has come to the village of Orgères to investigate its death. Central characters in the drama were Edmond Lescarbot, a country doctor who loved astronomy. His adversary, the celebrated Professor Leverrier, honored by King Louis Philippe for predicting the discovery of Neptune. Their meeting, which was for a time to make Orgères internationally famous, grew out of strange irregularities in the orbit of the planet Mercury, which was disobeying Newton's laws of physics. Yet from the start, Vulcan had a question mark hanging over it. Some amateurs saw it, like this American railway engineer who wrote, "A small boy asked me what was the matter with the sun. On looking at it, I saw a planet." But no professional observed it until 1878, time of a great eclipse in the United States. Professor James Craig Watson's party stationed themselves at Separation in Wyoming. During totality, he spotted an unknown object near a known star. So did one of his colleagues in Colorado. But Vulcan has never been seen again.
Vulcan officially died in 1915 with the publication of Albert Einstein's general theory of relativity. His concept of gravitation predicted that Mercury would move exactly in the way it was being observed to move. Very simply because Albert Einstein predicted that bodies moving in a high gravitational field would move somewhat differently to that predicted by Isaac Newton's theory of gravitation. So accordingly, with the publication of his theory in 1915, Vulcan officially died, and the search for the Holy Grail, so to speak, in the skies died.
But has it been buried? Dr. Henry Corton of Dowling College on Long Island, New York, has, with Professor Don Albert, taken ultra-high-powered photographs of the sun during eclipses. Among the familiar stars on the negative plates, they've discovered what they think are objects a few miles across, swirling around the sun.
The objects occupy essentially the same position in the sky relative to the sun that the early reports of Vulcan did record.
Vulcan perhaps did exist, and then you have to explain what happened to it. Why don't we see Vulcan anymore? And things just don't fly off, but they could disintegrate. And being so close to the sun, it would experience strong gravitational forces and perhaps did not survive, and now is in smaller fragments in that vicinity.
There was an object. It was observed by a number of people and recorded in the proper position. And here we are, on the order of 100 years later, finding a bunch of debris in the area. It seems a straightforward conclusion to make that the two are directly related. We're looking at the leftovers of Vulcan.
A different kind of celestial conundrum lies in the library built by Sir Christopher Wren at Trinity College in Cambridge. It's in the Chronicle of Gervaise, a book written in the 12th century by a monk from Canterbury. Jack Hartung, an American space scientist, discovered that on one page was a mysterious report handwritten 8 centuries ago in Latin.
What this says, when translated into English, is that on a particular evening in the year 1178, June 18th to be exact, there were at least 5 men sitting and observing a new moon, and just after sunset, the new moon was visible, and they observed that the upper horn of a new moon, the upper horn is the language that's used in the text, split. And from this division point came fire, hot coals, and sparks. Quite a remarkable thing to observe, I think. And the text goes on to say that this moon, which they saw, writhed as if it were a wounded snake.
Hartung followed the trail back to Kent.
The moon this evening looks much as it must have looked on that evening of June 18th, 1178, some 802 years ago. It's a very thin crescent appearing above the western horizon just after sunset.
The fact that it was a new moon recorded in the Chronicle gave Hartung his clue.
The midpoint of the upper horn of a new moon corresponds to a latitude of 45 degrees north. The new moon itself indicates that the longitude of the site of such an event was 90 degrees east. And from that we can predict that there should be something observable on the surface of the moon, some scar to represent what actually happened that evening.
From the Earth, nothing is now visible. But, wondered Hartung, could the witnesses have seen the effects of something out of sight, just over the rim, on the dark side of the moon? And in just the right place on pictures taken by orbiting spacecraft, he found this meteor crater, 13 miles across, named Giordano Bruno. Most significant, the network of bright rays told Hartung the impact was fresh. He's convinced this is the explanation of Gervaise's story, a unique sighting.
So those 5 men who witnessed the formation of Giordano Bruno on that evening of June 18th in 1178 are almost certainly the only 5 men in recorded history to have observed such a significant